Why does a guy from the Bronx want to be mayor of Chicago?
Well, because I'm not from the Bronx anymore. I was born there, but I've been living here now for 7 years. I can't stand by and watch what's happening here. I always talk about my parents. Very important in my life, put me in the right direction. Without them, I never would have been anywhere. My dad died in '83, my mom died in 2004. But my dad was a World War II Marine. He was at American Samoa, Guadalcanal, New Guinea, New Britain, Iwo Jima, and the occupation of Japan as a machine gunner. And the things that he saw before he was 25 years old affected him for the rest of his life. And I grew up in that. My dad was very difficult to grow up with.
And when you say difficult to grow up with, what do you mean exactly?
He couldn't sleep at night. He was prone to anger and fits of anger. Substance abuse and alcoholism. With everything he did in his life, the most difficult thing he did was get sober for the last 7 years of his life.
And did the family take a brunt of that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, we all did. And I was the youngest of 3 sons. So I was shielded from it more than my older brothers, who had to really deal with it head on. But the bottom line is, it gave me a lot more insight into people.
I want to know when you decided that particular moment. I want to know what that moment was like and what made you finally go, okay, I'm going to do it.
Paul Bauer.
Really?
Yeah. Paul Bauer. It doesn't get any worse. High-ranking police officer in the shadow of City Hall, killed by a 4-time felon, convicted felon, wearing body armor with an extended magazine. Every murder is a tragedy, but I don't know a worse example of the condition of this city than what happened with Paul Bauer. Val, you gotta realize I didn't start this. People came to me and kind of built this movement that's really caught on. It's like a tidal wave now. I can't walk down the street without people honking their horns and saying, run, run, run.
Do you feel like running for mayor is a do-over moment for you?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I believe that God takes you to places and puts you in positions that you can make a difference. As I like to say, the only thing that's gotten better in the city in the last 7 years is the Cubs. And the mayor will take credit for that.
If Emmanuel were not running, would you still run for mayor, 100%?
I can't say 100%, but I'd say likely.
Let's talk about your wife, Kristen. She's a pretty tough cookie, successful lawyer, right? Yeah. Is she tougher than you?
She likes to say that there has to be a sensitive one in this relationship, and it's not her.
Oh, it's not her. So then let me ask you this. If she said, I don't want you to run, would you still run?
Probably.
You know what you're running up against, and we're talking about the money, the ads, the this, that, and the other. Are you confident that you will be able to stay toe-to-toe with that?
I've had conversations with Dr. Willie Wilson and Paul Vallis,
yes,
and we've agreed that we're going to run a gentleman's campaign talking about the issues and our solutions so that the citizens of Chicago can make an intelligent choice as to who should be mayor. The problem is that's not what the mayor's going to do. He can't talk about his accomplishments because he doesn't have any. What he's doing is he's going to attack and distract. We're going to talk about gun violence. He's going to talk about global warming, right? The environment. We're going to talk about the economy of the city and what's happening here. He's going to talk about Donald Trump. It's pathetic.
Do you consider yourself the underdog?
Absolutely. But he's failed. He's failed to lead this city in every regard, whether it's the schools, the economy, the taxes, the infrastructure. And it's terrible to watch him trying to get away with it. He can't talk about his successes, so what does he do? He goes to Puerto Rico for photo ops. He goes to Ireland for photo ops. He doesn't give people credit that they deserve. He's the smartest person in every room he walks into, and as a result, his arrogance is overwhelming. And he thinks that Chicago doesn't see it. The people of Chicago feel it.
You can run a police department. We know you can do that, but what makes you think you can run the 3rd largest city in the United States?
I've been a manager. I worked at the top of city government, 3 major cities in this country, for 16 years. I worked with guys like Cory Booker, hand in glove. And at the end of the day, I've learned a lot. I know how to manage. I've managed large, diverse organizations, and I've been trained in business management. And that's what we need. We need business management in city government, not politics, because our politics is failing. If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And that's what we're getting right now.
What will you do to fix the schools, the gun violence?
I've reduced crime and complaints against officers everywhere I've gone in my police career as a manager. Everywhere. The thing that people don't know, because it's been covered up by revisionist history, is that we had the lowest murder rates in this city 2 years running while I was superintendent, but everybody thinks because of one event and everything that happened afterwards that it was a failure. No, it was pretty successful.
The CPD, your former men and women in blue, would they have you back as mayor?
I believe so. As far as the schools go, it's the same issue. It's a more holistic approach. The gun violence, the schools, and the economy of the city are so intricately interwoven. What happens outside the school affects what happens inside the school. We need to make sure that our children are ready to learn when they get there at 9 a.m. Not crossing two gang lines because we closed the schools. Maybe not eating because they're in a single-parent household, and maybe mom needs Adderall and forgot to feed the children before they went to school. We're talking about a longer-term plan of putting social services right into the schools and making the schools two-tiered wraparound services, not only for the child, but also for the family. There comes a point, Val, when the truth matters. And I think that point is right now in Chicago.
If the Laquan McDonald family were watching this right now, and you had to convince them that you're the guy to run this city, what would you say to them?
I would take them through how the event unfolded and what my role was, which is something
Take us through that, and I think people should know that.
Okay. When I saw the video, I said to myself that the officer has a problem. He's going to have a problem articulating why he did what he did. And if he can't, it's going to be a bad situation.
When you saw the video, what did you think? Because you were briefed when it happened, but what you were told and what was written in the reports and seeing the video, did those two stories line up for you?
I knew nothing about what was written in any reports, nor have I ever seen any written reports regarding this shooting. Not once. There was exactly one step that I could take in that case, and that was put Jason Van Dyke on paid desk duty. That's by Illinois state law.
Did you ever anticipate at that point that it would be a bad situation for you?
No, no, absolutely not. The police department does not investigate its own use of force. Outside investigation by IPRA, which is now COPA. I was not in charge of the investigation. There was a federal grand jury that was impaneled, which is something that people want. They want federal investigations. That took place. We don't even know the results of that grand jury yet, do we? It's never been revealed. Just think about that for a second.
The problem is you still have a whole community that's not buying that.
The system was rigged in a fashion where I couldn't do anything about it.
What do you mean when you say that?
I told you, I only had the authority to put the officer on paid desk duty.
So that's it. So you couldn't, even though you had seen the tape, you knew how horrible it was, there was nothing else you could have done?
Nothing. Nothing. The investigation was done by IPRA in conjunction with the state's attorney, the U.S. attorney, and behind the scenes, previously, Steve Patton had engaged in a civil suit with the family. Last January, I believe it was.
Okay.
January of 17, Steve Patton resigned. And when he resigned, he did an exit interview with a reporter. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that when I saw that video, I believed then, and it's been borne out now, that it's a case of murder. And I said to myself, well, how is it that he sold a case of murder to the city council on behalf of a police officer? Because that means that the officer was not acting in the scope of his authority. Well, somebody gave me a copy of the transcript of his testimony in front of the city council.
Patton's.
Yeah, in front of the city council finance committee, where he describes the video, he describes the shooting, he describes the events of all the officers around it. He explained that he wanted to give the family $5 million without filing a lawsuit, and said that they do that all the time, which I don't believe to be true. Somebody should go look at that.
Okay.
But this was in April of 2015, when the mayor was in the runoff with Chuy Garcia.
Okay.
So they started asking him questions, and Alderman Irvin from the West Side asked the best question. And he said, so, Mr. Patton, is this a case where the officer's actions were so depraved and wanton that the city might not be liable for his actions if they were criminal? And he gave him some sort of a lawyerly answer. And Irvin followed up and said, so in your opinion, did the officer act within the scope of his authority? And Steve Patton said, yes, he did. Well, those two statements cannot reconcile. If it's a case of murder, it's not within the scope of his authority. So what was the motivation in April of 2015? It was to keep that video from being made public. I didn't know that until last year when somebody gave me the transcript.
That had to have been very troubling for you.
Very troubling. Very troubling. I think it's criminal.
What are you going to do about it? What do you want to do about it? What have you done about it?
I don't know if I should tell you.
Yeah, you should.
A lot of people have been made aware of it, let's put it that way.
You should tell me.
No, I shouldn't, because it's not my place to tell you. But I've made a lot.
But you've done something.
I've made a lot of people aware of it, absolutely. It's a little bit of a bombshell for you, huh?
Yeah. You got to give me a second to process. Now, let me ask you, do you feel like the wrong guy lost their job? Should it have been him?
What I will say is this. He has not taken accountability for anything. The reason why he wanted me to resign is because he didn't want to own the fallout. So I said, Mayor, I'm the best protection you have, because I can go out and take all the hits on this one, and you can stay behind the scenes.
So you were completely caught off guard when the mayor praised you that morning, and then hours later announced that you were fired.
He told me that he wanted me to resign. And I told him, no, I'm not going to resign. I would resign under two circumstances: if I did something wrong or if I was quitting, and I'm doing neither. And it went around and around and around until he finally said, well, that's what I want to tell people. And I told him, you can tell people whatever you want. And what people don't know is this went on for 17 days. His chief of staff at the time was Eileen Mitchell. She called me that afternoon and said, we got to do some paperwork. And I said, well, what paperwork? And she said, your letter of resignation. I said, did you talk to the mayor? And she said, well, yeah. I said, well, didn't he tell you I'm not resigning? And this went on for 17 days until a reporter filed a Freedom of Information Act request for my letter of resignation that didn't exist. And on December 17th, Eileen Mitchell, not even the mayor, Eileen Mitchell sent me a letter of termination.
Right. I want to ask you something, since we're on this topic of the mayor. When he asked why he fired you, Emmanuel said, he's become an issue.
Rather than dealing with the issue and a distraction.
Hard not to take that personally, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's a lie. It's a lie. And you can tell he's lying when his lips are moving.
If the roles were reversed, would you have fired the mayor?
Why? Just somebody explain to me why. By every measure, the department was going in the right direction. And because of one incident, we're going to reverse field?
If you had 10 minutes with Jason Van Dyke, let's say today, 10 minutes with him today, maybe 10 minutes with him when it happened, what would you say to him?
How split-second decisions can change somebody's life, or take somebody's life, or lose somebody's life. I can't put myself in anybody else's shoes, but I know that he's gone through hell, and he's going to continue to go through hell. And it's a no-win situation for anybody. And Laquan McDonald was a victim in so many different ways. He was a ward of the state when this occurred. He had a tragic life. And, unfortunately, the police end up having to deal with some of those situations in the worst possible scenarios. This one went terribly bad.
Which headline do you like better? McCarthy wins mayoral race, McCarthy regains the trust of the African-American community.
I think they're the same thing. I think they're the same thing. First of all, I already talked about regaining trust, right? I don't like that phrase at all. I don't like it at all.
I know you don't like it, but it's a very real thing. It is true. There are people who don't trust the police.
No, you missed my point. We never had the trust.
Well, but it's definitely not improved since everything that's happened. So even if you didn't have it, you don't have it now.
So you're not regaining something that you didn't have.
Okay, well then how do you get it?
How do you gain trust?
How do you gain trust?
Yeah, I told you. Through exposure and conversation and having those tough talks and moving forward from there.